Why won't they read my script? Okay, that's a very good question. A lot of people have that problem, and they want to know why Hollywood agents and managers, producers uh, won't read scripts. Lawyers won't even read scripts, and that's because it's a locked establishment. They have an established number of people making films, and they don't want to go outside that. Uh, they frequently say it's because of unsolicited material. We don't read unsolicited material. That's a protection from lawsuits. That's a legal argument. Well, we don't read anyone's script. How could we have participated in stealing this guy's idea? Uh, but frankly, they don't have to read your script because they don't want to. It's as simple as that. Uh, the state legislature has given them permission to discriminate. Uh, they've got a list of uh, writers that they deal with, mainly white uh, and established. And if you're new, black, brown, queer, Catholic, uh, if you're white and starting out, you can forget it. They won't read anything. Uh, they just say, we're afraid of being sued, and so your work will never be read. And they're lazy. They like it this way. How would you like to sit in the office and make 100,000 a year and read 8 scripts or listen to 8 songs per year, which is basically what happens. It's because of the opulence of the business, they can afford to do that. They're not going to get off their butt because they don't have to. They like it the way it is. White writers writing white stories. I know you are aware of the African American actors that are uh, nominated for any number of awards, including the Academy Awards, but they hardly ever win, and it just smacks of tokenism. Uh, and that happened. This happened 5 or 6 times in the last 10 years. Uh, no African Americans win a or people of color, not Hispanic or almost all the minorities are locked out of the Academy Awards, uh, winning Academy Awards. But then the next day, and this happened only last year, there was a guy on GMA, Good Morning America, the next day saying, well, there aren't any black stories, and there aren't any black stories because there aren't any black writers. And the argument is there aren't compelling reasons to give black actors Academy Awards because it's not essentially a black story. Uh, and I think that's a good argument because many of the times the scripts are written for whites and the black actors given the job. It's essentially a white story, and you're substituting a black actor. And you're told when you're writing a script, don't define the character in any racial or nowadays even a gender way because of the gay community and transgender community. So you just write these nebulous characters and it's handed to a black actor. Well, it's not a black story. So it's very difficult for a black actor to win, maybe acting out a white person's role. So I honestly believe you've got an establishment in Hollywood with a list of writers that they work with, and everybody else is damned. And I know you've seen videographers go out behind the producer and agents out in the alley behind their buildings, and they open the dumpster and there's just tons of paper, script after hundreds of millions of scripts. I think that's kind of going away. Everybody reads with the tablet now, but I think you get the point. There are a lot of scripts out there, and I know the agents will say, well, we need this protection, but other industries go to the state legislature and they fix it, so they're not screwed. Mostly middlemen, if you think about it, and people who are harassed and needed. And I think we do need some limited liability. The state legislature needs to limit who can sue and for what. And basically, you should sue the person who steals your idea, not the person you submit it to. But I guess they think that's deep pockets, so the lawyers are all for harassing agents and managers, producers. But the real thief would be the writer. If your script is stolen, it's stolen by another writer, not his agent. I mean, how does the agent know? They would have to do their due diligence and, look at the copyright. But it's really a sick situation. I just used the word list. In the Soviet Union, they had a list. The government made a list. It's no different from what's going on in Hollywood. They call it their list. Their list of writers, and they will not consider anything different. You probably know what's happening in Washington, D.C. The establishment in both political parties are being replaced. Democrats, maybe a left centrist, are being replaced by a new majority in the Democratic Party coming from the left. And so, Joe Biden will be the last left centrist candidate for the Democratic Party. And the Republicans have already replaced their establishment. I mean, Trump was anti-establishment. And that's why the Bushes and McCain, both McCains, father and daughter, they really hated Donald Trump. They called him a populist and all kinds of dirty names because he replaced them. And the Republican nominee in 2024 will be another anti-establishment candidate. You look at the Florida governor, DeSantis. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a Republican nomination. And somebody under the wing of Bernie Sanders. Probably it won't be him, but it will be someone trained and brought up by him. And he will be the kingmaker in 2024 as to who replaces Mr. Biden as the Democratic candidate. Please understand, this is coming to Hollywood. As soon as they're done in Washington, D.C., they'll start in on Hollywood. My expertise is the Soviet Union. The Cold War was going on when I was in school, and I had my PhD from a respected European research college. And they It's a totalitarian government, but I think a lot of people don't understand Trotsky. They know about Lenin, and Trotsky was killed, murdered by Stalin in this big political thing. But his book that made him famous and powerful and called intellectual, a thinker, is called Perpetual Revolution. It means once you have the revolution, like the Russian Revolution in 1917, you have to keep going. So this anti-establishment is coming to movement, is coming to Hollywood, and you should be ready. A lot of my time studying totalitarian governments was spent with revolution, the nature of revolution. I don't know, 100 books on 100 different revolutions, and I was asked to read them and pick out patterns. Some revolutions can be predicted, and what the establishment do is they liberalize or reform the oppression. That could be what Hollywood does. Hollywood could go to the state legislature and say, we need limited liability so we can read these scripts. If they did that, the state legislature would say, okay, you can't sue an agent or a manager or even a producer unless they had knowledge of the theft, the copyright theft. You could always sue the person who actually steals or profits from, whose intent it is to steal the story. So writers would not have limited liability, but everyone, and the filmmakers and managers and agents would have limited liability, so they couldn't be sued. Guess what? Well, they're not going to do that. The current point of view in Hollywood is they're not going to bend to black, brown, and queer and Catholic scripts. And they're not going to go to the state legislature and ask for limited liability because they'd have to get off their ass. They'd have to read black, queer, Catholic stories, which now they don't. So they just keep making the same movies over and over and over again. This has been done before. Okay, unsolicited material. Artists and songwriters have always encountered this roadblock. It's really fighting words. And after you've poured your heart into a script or a song, and write 100 letters and 7 come back with unsolicited material, and everyone else ignores you, and you've done all that work and no one wants to read your stuff, then you know what I mean. It's basically a universal gesture. What they're saying to everybody is stop, we're untouchable, but your career goes no further. Because and I think it's an excuse to discriminate, because they've got their lists made up of mostly white men, few white females, but black, brown, queer, and Catholic people are locked out, legally locked out. It's infuriating and really sad. It inhibits capitalism. Just think of all the good quality films that should have been made, but the script was never read. Think about the jobs and the tickets that would be sold, and the evolution of storytelling and evolution of film. I think 10,000 years from now, they will go back and look at this era. They'll call it the early era of film, and say it's just regurgitated. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Very rarely is there a new idea expressed. Uh, so what's the solution? The state legislature. They've got to grant limited liability, change the tort law. The word tort means about lawsuits. If someone hurts you, damages you more than $20, you have the right to sue in a federal or a state court. Someone runs over you and breaks your leg, and you were going to be in the NFL, then they owe you a lot of money. If they spill ink on your nice $100 shoes, $200 shoes, then they owe you $200. And so that's to keep people from hurting other people. Now, what I'm arguing is that agents and managers be given this limited liability. That would free them up and they could read your script. They're really only middlemen, agents, and so what they're doing is their job is to hear an idea and pass it on to the artist. So you're suing someone for doing their job. Okay, the first analogy that I like to put forward is Twitter and Facebook and all the high-tech corporations. I think it was 1996 they passed the Communications Decency Act, which prohibited lawsuits. You can't sue Twitter and you can't sue Facebook because they're just the middleman. They're just passing on the information. And as long as they're not creating content, they're not liable in any way. So how's that like Hollywood? Well, Twitter and Facebook and all of the high-tech middlemen are like agents. They're agents of ideas, agents of and managers of information. So Zuckerberg and the people that founded all these other people that founded a number of high-tech information companies, websites, went to Congress and got that done. It's not uncommon in history. At one time, railroads had statutory immunity. Telephone companies had statutory immunity. Petroleum industry had a lot of limitations. So, and a lot of those limitations have gone away, and some of those limitations on lawsuits are still in effect. I know, research and development, it's very hard to sue a drug manufacturer or anyone over an invention. Well, this invention hurt me. Well, that would and then the inventor is sued and he loses all his money and his house and his life's destroyed by could be a frivolous lawsuit. And if that gets in the newspapers, what's going to happen to invention and development and coming up with new ideas and new practices? Well, it would have a chilling effect. Well, one inventor would say, well, this inventor in a different state, they got sued, so I'm not going to invent anything. And the whole economy and progress and our living standard will stagnate. So we need inventions. We need new thinking. Hollywood needs new thinking, and they're not going to get it until they get new blood. Okay, so I have a list And if you don't mind, I'll just read it to you so you understand that this is common practice. I will get a lot of negative comments, and the Hollywood establishment might come after me, but uh, tough. Uh, I'm just going to read a list of all the other industries that have solved their problem. Hollywood doesn't want to solve problems. They want to keep things status quo, the way things are. They're making a lot of money. They're not doing any work, not real work, uh, and they don't really care if the movies they make are the same year after year. Okay, here's my list. Uh, this is not exactly analogous, but I think everybody understands it's very difficult, impossible for you to sue the ambulance driver. They're the middleman, right? They're just doing their job. And they're picking you up from the street. Car ran over you and broke your leg in 6 places, and it causes you pain and suffering. And yeah, I'm sure lawyers will make an argument. Well, the ambulance driver made it worse. Probably not, but if he can get some people to believe it, then he's going to get paid. So I'm sure every state has what's called statutory immunity. And that's when the government, you can't sue the government. It's very difficult to sue a fireman or a policeman. And what they put in the laws are best practices or within guidelines. Well, the police officer was only doing what is written in his manual. So if he was doing what's in his training manual, then you can't sue him. If he's doing what every fire department in the country's doing, then you can't sue a fireman. Uh, it's not total immunity. Uh, it's limited liability. In other words, there are rules. It makes it harder, more difficult to sue. Now, let's talk about medical malpractice. That is long been debated. Some states give doctors a break, and some less a break. I think every state has some kind of protection, whether it's the amount or the manner of lawsuits, and as long as the doctor is doing what is I can't say all the time, but a huge percent of tort laws in states and in the federal government have the same thing that we were just talking about, best practices. If a doctor does what every other doctor is doing, then you can't sue him. And they have federal guidelines, laws, rules, regulations that manage a doctor. If he's doing what the government tells him to do, and if he's doing what is lawful, a lot of times you can't sue. And a lot of states have limited liability. You can't sue for over a certain amount. Yeah, it's if you lose a leg, you cannot sue for more than 200,000. If you lose a life, you can't sue for more than $1 million. Or there's maybe some kind of formula for calculating the limited liability. The law is very complicated. We make people go to school 3 extra years, and then lawyers pick a specialty and study more. But tort law is huge and it's complicated. But I think it should be just as hard to sue a agent or a manager as it is a doctor. It's not easy to sue a doctor. And it should be difficult to sue an agent for reading a script. Here's another example. Was my second example. I guess that would be third example. Ambulance drivers, police, and firemen. First responders is number one. Number two are doctors. Number three is farmers. Almost every state has a right to farm act or some kind of limited liability. I live in an agricultural state, and it's you can sue the food processor. I mean, that's basically the last person that touches it before before it gets to you. Grocery stores have limited liability because you don't want them going out of business. A lot of communities only have one or two stores, and they have a lawsuit or they're fearful of a lawsuit, so they just either they don't go into business or they close their business. So what do the people do for food? So it's to protect the industry. And they're so arrogant. This establishment in Hollywood. If you said, "Well, we want to protect you from lawsuits," well, we don't need protection. Protection from what? Reading scripts? We don't read scripts. So a real nice lady sent me a rejection note, and she said, "I know it's catch-22, but that's the way it is. It is catch-22. But farmers have protection to protect food. Why don't agents and managers have protection to protect movies? I don't want to be redundant, but that's the reason why all these movies are it's the same thing, regurgitated. There's no new writers. They don't allow them in. In the Soviet Union, the government had a list. It was the Soviet Writers Union, which is it was a writers guild, but they had a partnership with the government. Well, all labor unions in the Soviet Union were a partnership with the government, and if you had underground books, I'm sure they had underground screenplays. That would be something interesting to research. But people would buy mimeograph, smuggle. They couldn't buy them, maybe on the black market. Typewriters and mimeograph machines, and a lot of intellectual property was spread about through. I think it's seismolt is the Russian word for them. Bootlegged books that were not on the approved list. And I've heard talent agents and establishment people, they're really hypocrites because they say they're for the black, brown, queer, and religious minorities. And they claim to be good socialists, members of the Democratic Party, but they have 8 white writers and they're not going to read anything else. But I've heard them say, "You're not on anybody's list." What list? Well, writers or agents and have a client list. And I can't help thinking of the Soviet Writers Guild Union because there shouldn't be a list. I guess you could have a list of clients, but the establishment in Hollywood should always be reading and looking for new talent, and they don't. It's stagnant, and I think it's going to end. I don't know if it'll end during my lifetime. I'm actually retired. I don't even teach political science anymore. But revolution is a thing that comes around. I mean, you think you're immune. You give $10,000 to the Democratic Party and you think they won't come for you? Well, read Trotsky's Perpetual Revolution. It'll never stop. Once we get rid of the establishment in Washington, we'll start on Wall Street and we'll start on we'll go west. And eventually it'll come to Hollywood. If they're smart, they will liberalize their policies. By liberalize, I mean change and open capitalism and the Hollywood dream to minorities. It could come from within or it could come from without. People could stop watching white stories written by whites, or they may, the public might see the hypocrisy in whites writing black stories and stop consuming films. Or it could come from within. Some intelligent attorneys could lobby. It needs to come from the Producers Guild, the Writers Guild. I see that they're all in the Directors Guild. Screen Actors Guild might help, but they're not going to do that because they're establishment. You gotta let a bunch of new talent come in and compete with us. I'm not going to do that. It's anti-competitive, and in a capitalist economy, it's illegal to interfere with capitalism. And I think the tort laws are doing that, especially when it comes to copyright. It's illegal to price fixing. It's antitrust laws. Monopoly is illegal. All of that is designed to protect capitalism. If Hollywood wants to grow and make money and include more people, like they say they do, then they need statutory immunity. Number 4, a number of states have passed laws that protect businesses from COVID lawsuits. Other states not. There's not a federal law. The election of Mr. Biden pretty much took care of that. So you will be able to sue McDonald's or a Walmart or anybody, maybe FedEx or whatever, if you can prove that they gave you, they were reckless in giving you COVID. You can't sue Pfizer or Moderna over the side effects. Big business has always done this, and there are an untold number of industries that are protected, and you can't sue them. And they're in all 50 states. As long as they're following safety standards and they're protected from nonsensical lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits. We talked about farmers. What about the gun industry? The gun industry has gone to the state legislatures, and it's very hard it's impossible to sue a gun manufacturer because I guess they're the middleman. They took the iron and made it into steel, and then the steel was formed into a gun, and they sold it to somebody who sold it to somebody else, and you want to hold them responsible for a shooting. That's analogous to what's going on in Hollywood. Somebody takes an idea and hands it to another person to have an idea, and then maybe the filmmaker infringes on someone's copyright, or the writer, a second writer, infringes someone's copyright. It should be just as hard to sue a agent or a manager as it is to sue a gun manufacturer. When I was young, I was very young when I came across this. My home state has what's called a Good Samaritan law, and the way that was explained to me 60 years ago, probably. If you are lying in the road and you've got 7 cracks in your leg and you can't get out of the road, but there's cars coming, if you run out there and pull the guy out of the traffic, he can't sue you. You're trying to help him. Well, it hurt. Pain and suffering. I'm going to sue the guy that drugged me out of traffic. He may have saved your life, but then you're going to sue him. Well, you can't sue someone, even if they do make it worse. My leg was broken 6 times, and now I'm in a wheelchair. I wouldn't be in a wheelchair if you hadn't pulled me out of the traffic. If you'd just let me lay there, so I'm going to sue you. To me, it makes no sense if the government allowed a Good Samaritan. So let's say apply that to talent agents and managers. As long as they're in good faith and they're trying to help the writer, they shouldn't be sued. That's what they do. Agents and managers help writers pass it on to someone else. Oh, I know who is looking for a script, a black Western, written by a black writer. I found one. I took a chance at being sued and read it. So there's a guy on the other side of town that was looking for a black Western. So he hands it to him. There's no liability in that. I don't see how there could be, but they've created it. Partly it's the lawyers. I know Shakespeare said, "Kill all the lawyers." I think I know what he meant. Data protection laws. You can't sue a website for if they get hacked. All your information. There's a law. There's probably 8 or 10 laws that apply, and California has one of the most strict ones. Those you cannot sue Gmail if your emails are hacked. There's a limited liability. I'm not sure how far that goes, but it's very hard. Can you imagine, with all the computer hacks that we've had and the data loss, what the courts would be like? They would be overwhelmed, and people would not go into business. We have limited liability laws to protect business, and they protect almost every business except movies. Fair Credit Reporting Act. You can't sue the credit reporting agencies for bad data. I'm sure you can sue them if it was done on purpose, but that doesn't happen. So I know you file a correction, you write them a letter and say, hey, this is inaccurate information. It's very difficult to sue them in federal court. There's a Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that means they have to treat you fairly, but it also means if they make a mistake, you can't close them down and sue them for $12 million because they got a $120 electric bill wrong. Federal securities law has certain limitations for corporations. That, as far as I know, is limited to required arbitration. You can't sue your broker because the stock went down. You can't sue the company because the stock went down. When it comes to the securities industry, they have a required arbitration. You have to go in front of a panel and persuade them that there was some kind of serious fiduciary mistakes that caused you to lose the money. But it's can you imagine every time the stock market goes down, the courtrooms just fill with lawsuits. It's to protect capitalism, and the people in Hollywood need to understand that Hollywood is wealthy and their works are circulated around the world. Hollywood rules the world. The television sets and the movie theaters. Now it's all streaming online, and that's because they make movies in London and Moscow and Beijing, but who has been the top dog? Hollywood, and that's because we live in a capitalist system where we have fair choice and market conditions. So, and I asked a guy about the ideology. He said, "Well, some of it is fake. To fit in Hollywood, you have to fake being a leftist. You're these people that are producers and work at the big studios that run the big studios. They understand the beauty and wealth created by the free market. The actors and actresses may be leftists, but they're probably not. They're never going to understand. They went to college and they didn't get it. You have to take a basic economics class. Now, what's going on in that class, I have no idea. This is an interesting one. Computer fraud. There are laws that protect internet cafes and internet providers. You can't sue AT&T if someone defrauds someone in your name, or if you are defrauded. It's like that would be like suing the post office. You can't do it. They're just the middleman. Cable operators and satellite carriers cannot be sued. They're the middleman. One of the most famous exemptions is not about tort law, but baseball. 1922, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of baseball. And baseball can legally act as a monopoly. So if you wanted to go against Major League Baseball and you want to create your own league, I don't know, let's say Wichita, Kansas, Fort Worth, Texas, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Nashville, and start a baseball league. Those towns do not have Major League Baseball. They might have minor league, but they don't have Major League Baseball. And the Major League Baseball boycotted you or told the players if they signed with you or played for one of your teams, you would never play in Major League Baseball. Oh, if Major League Baseball was mean or predatory towards a rival, there's nothing you could do about it. So baseball in the way before 1920s went to the federal government and got an exemption from antitrust laws. So that's all we're asking that happens in Hollywood. Basically, you can't sue us. You have a right to sue, but there can be limitations. I think the California legislature should go ahead and do something like that. It would free up movie producers. It would free up managers and agents and directors. And guess what? People would get off their rear end and start reading scripts, and you would have your scripts read. And it would be a market economy. But it's not a market economy now because there are limitations on the sellers. We're gonna have a limited number of sellers. Well, what's that going to do to the price? What's that going to do to the volume? By volume, I mean how many are sold, bought and sold. So to answer your question, why? I know it's complicated and this has been a long little talk, but You asked me why won't they read your screenplay. Number one is because they don't want to. Number two is because they're probably not going to like it because they're establishment. And if you're new, then you're by definition not establishment. They might consider, if you are black, brown, queer, or Catholic, you are probably considered in Hollywood as anti-establishment. They see you as the enemy because, number one, they're going to have to start doing work. Number two, you are going to be competition for someone, either them or their friends. And so they have thrown themselves behind this no unsolicited material. And it's partly because of the lawyers. The state legislature ought to protect, you'd think they would want to protect the establishment from all these lawsuits. But by not protecting them, they are strengthening their establishment because they get to choose who writes, who reads, who makes what. So it's not really the market because you've been locked out. I don't know. You go into a cattle auction and they say be there by 12 noon. The auction starts, and you get there at 12:05 and you're locked out. I mean, is it really market forces behind the door at the cattle market? It drives the price down. That's what that would do. Less competition. So we need competition, and we need a good price, but mostly we need access to the market. It could be socialism. I don't know. Usually that's not included in the definition of socialism, but anytime the market's not working, you have to think, well, why not? And Hollywood's the market is not working in Hollywood. You could make the market work by making people unafraid to read a script. Right now they're afraid, or I'm not sure that's a good word, afraid. They're reluctant to do that because they think it will degrade their establishment. If they read scripts and they actually pay for black, brown, queer, and Catholic scripts, they and their friends see their power as diminished. So they won't go to the state legislature. So that's why your screenplay is not being read. It won't be read until something's done. You might need to go out there and be friends, befriend these people, and you could be like a court gesture because they're Hollywood royalty. So they have to be entertained. And number one, they have to be entertained. Number two, they have to be you have to be trustworthy. So if you're an email address and you've written a great script, tough. No, it'll never get read. That means it'll never get produced. You will have wasted your time because it's very networky. It's very fake. You have to put on a show. Do not go and tell them that you're a PhD in political science. It scares the hell out of them. Number one, because they didn't pay attention in school, and so that threatens them. They're the stupidest people I have ever come across as a group. I know it's a stereotype. You shouldn't talk like that, but I have to be honest. I taught freshmen in a community college for 30 years, political science, American government, to 18, 19-year-old new college students who are lazy to read. Hollywood is lazy to read. They will not do the work. And so I have to assume they were like that when they were in college, so they didn't. Okay, I wrote a script about Lenin's body and submitted it. Got, I don't know, 10 or 12 people are reading it. One lady goes back, do you expect me to believe that someone's body has not decayed or rotted after 90 years? So we're talking about Lennon. She wasn't aware that about Lenin's tomb. It's a major tourist attraction in Moscow, and and she said I needed more explanation. Once she wasn't aware of it, and she said, "Well, it needs more explanation." But that's what I mean. They're lazy readers, and they're not going to do the research. Also wrote an adaptation of Tobit, and the girl started talking to me about Moses and the Egyptian captivity. And I had to explain to her that the Egyptian captivity and the Babylonian captivity were separate. And guess what her last name was? Siegel. I assume that she's Jewish, but she didn't know the difference between Moses and Tobit, or the Babylonian captivity took Jews east, and the Egyptian captivity, the Jews were taken west and held in Egypt, slavery. And she wasn't aware, but she had a problem with the script. Oh, this one had too much explanation. And she wanted me to cut it from 130 pages to 90, because an hour and a half movie is 90 pages. I said, who said it was not? Who said it was a 90-minute movie? That's the same lady who's ignorant of the Babylonian captivity. Let's see. I've had a few like that where you kind of wish they'd never read it, because they don't get it. And either you've included too much or not enough, but their basic information, they're not smart enough to have read it in the first place. So that's what we're dealing with in Hollywood. They've got their position. They're threatened by anyone knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than them. And yeah, it hurts you as a writer. Well, yeah, I'd write your state legislator. Tell your state legislature that the movie industry needs statutory immunity. Too many lawsuits. That's the only advice I have for you. Number one, they need statutory immunity. Number two, you have to go out there and network with these people and not be threatening to them. You have to be a court jester. You know, they kind of pretend to be dumb and suck up to the king. That's the only way to make it in Hollywood. Sorry, just tell it the way it is.